next on Three Guys in a Trek, we cover episode 7 of season 1, Justice. On an alien planet, young Wesley Crusher commits a transgression, small by our standards, but mandatorily punishable by death in theirs. So, I'm Matt. I've never seen the series.
I'm Dennis. I've seen it more than everybody else here combined.
I'm Mike. I've seen more than I thought I would.
All right, so this was quite the episode.
Absolutely.
So I warned you guys last week that, this was Wesley-centric and everybody was scantily clad.
The first part of that statement didn't bother me.
Yeah.
It was Wesley-centric, but it was not, even the short amount of time we've been doing this, it's not the typical Wesley episode.
Right.
Wesley wasn't there to save the day. This time Wesley was the damsel in distress.
Right.
He was as goofy as everyone else.
That's true. That's
He really
true.
was.
That's true.
But I have to give him credit, though, for the age that he was and the planet that he went to. I don't think his acting was that bad. He looked just as nervous and uncomfortable as any normal boy would.
So, yeah, the setup for this episode, they've dropped off colonists on a system. They go to another planet within a certain amount of distance from that system. And it looks like Earth, and they've beamed an away team down, and Dr. Crusher comes and says the crew needs some shore leave, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And the away team comes back. Of course, it's Riker, a few others, and they just have the biggest smiles on their faces.
Well, yeah.
Absolutely.
And as soon as you go back down there, we visit the planet, you know exactly what they've been up to.
They play at love.
They play at love.
They play
absolutely.
at love, and they make love at the drop of a hat. And Yar says,
Any hat.
Like this is the most thinly veiled sexual innuendo I think I've ever seen.
Yes.
It's like, and the first natives you see are super scantily clad, essentially bathing suits. And they prance. They're prancing.
They do
Jordan.
prance.
Now again, you have to think about the time that this TV show was on the air. I mean, for us now, that's a beer commercial during a football game.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, that was a big deal for them to be dressed that way on, basically primetime TV.
Yeah.
And
Gene Roddenberry wanted them less dressed.
And as you go through the episode, you realize if they could have made all these people completely nude, they would have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like their idea of it's essentially an Edenic planet is what it's trying to portray it
Right.
as. No shame, anything, free love, whatever.
I'm glad you clarified that. I didn't know what that meant.
For those less aware of biblical whatever.
So where do we go with this one? See, all right. So to me, the obvious is the sexuality part of it, right? It starts out. They take the away team to the planet for the second time when we actually get to meet the aliens for the first time, right?
Right.
So they meet down the second time, and Riker and Tasha Yar have already been there previously. Worf, Wesley, and Troy are visiting for the first time.
Right.
So the female alien comes up with very bad blonde wig, really tight perm, just kind of a.
It was the 80s, man.
It was weird, man.
Yeah, it was.
And she hugs Riker, and it's a creepy hug, right?
It was creepy.
And then the male alien, he hugs Tasha, and he's like, "Oh well, it's good to see you again." And she she kind of gives him a little extra squeeze and a grin. All right, so we can talk about all the sexual subtext, right? But to me, I don't know that the episode. I don't know if that's the point.
It was surprisingly deep.
It was fluff that did not need to be there.
Exactly.
It really didn't. This was an episode about capital punishment.
Capital punishment and Prime Directive, yes.
And the Prime Directive. That's what this episode was about.
Yeah.
And what's the best way to tackle a difficult episode. Talks about capital punishment and the Prime Directive. Make everybody half naked. That'll work. Let's run with that.
That'll distract all the stupid people. Now let's talk about the important stuff.
Yeah.
There's one scene near the beginning after they come back down where it goes into one of the rooms, and it's a slow pan, and it's all these people
making out,
getting oil rubs. It's just this.
Now
it just lingers on it forever.
Now here's the thing. Something I asked Dennis earlier. And we'll get to this as the story goes on. But you're talking about the oil rub. Really, there was only one oil rub going on. The dude was huge. All right?
Those were some calves.
Those were some calves. The woman that was massaging his legs, she had her hands on his calves, and it looked like she was just a tiny girl.
A basketball.
Yeah. And I mean, he was massive. And then later on, you get to the security guards, and they're about the size of the girl that was massaging the guy. Where was this guy? He should have been the security guards.
Right. Yeah. So
everyone running though.
Everybody runs. That's their custom.
That's what they do.
Yeah, the first thing that came to my mind is Baywatch, and they
didn't
do it in slow motion.
They didn't do it in slow motion. They didn't have the jiggle cam, I guess. Where
they didn't.
They didn't focus on it. I mean, I saw a lot more butt cheek than I thought I would see in a Star Trek episode.
Yeah. And then we start talking about capital punishment and the nature of justice.
The nature of justice. And it got deep really quick. And it got deep on two different subjects. The whole idea of, and it's, to me, it's relevant now, even here, as if you're a traveler traveling in a foreign country, and the difference between laws of the United States versus laws of France or laws of Greece or Australia or China or wherever you visit.
Greece would probably be the best analogy for this episode.
Yeah, right. Sorry,
Anyway, you were saying
reset. So yeah, you've got, like Matt says, the idea of capital punishment. So you've got Wesley Crusher. He's playing ball with four. They call them young people, but the one dude's got more hair on his chest than I do. So I mean, I don't know how young they were. They're too young to play at love, as the I guess is the way that they put it there, to keep it clean.
Right.
So you've got Wesley and these three other teenagers. I guess they could be. They're all just a little bit older, I would say, than Wesley, but they include him in their game. So they go out running. At the same time that Yar and Worf are having a discussion with the main male Edo about the crimes on the planet and the idea that hey, there are some places that are cordoned off and fenced off with these white markers, and if anybody does anything wrong within those areas, then they're put to death. And at the same exact time that conversation is happening, Wesley Crusher's trying to catch a ball, and he dives over one of these fences to catch the ball, and he crushes some flowers. And it's an off-limit zone, and like they just found out in the parallel scene, any crime at all is punishable by death. And Tasha Yar even makes the point, even a keep off the grass. Yes, even a keep off the grass. That's breaking the law. All laws punishable by death. And it's they consider it a good, I guess, preventative of all.
No one commits any crimes.
Nobody commits any crimes.
With the way that it was presented, with the way that it was presented, it was the Edo were confused by how they didn't understand the laws. It's like, well, if it's marked off, you just don't do that because it's better to not die than it is to break the law.
Cause some sadness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cause, yes.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the death they had gotten used to, but yeah.
And they were less concerned about putting Wesley to death. So you had the officers show up immediately. which was
they
odd.
Prance. They
prance up, which was odd.
Here's one thing about them showing up immediately, because Riker was talking to Worf, and he gets Troy and says they're going to go look for Wes because Wes has wandered off again. Well, no, he didn't. You sent him away.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That kind of, yeah. Anyway.
So well, they had just talked about Tasha Yar had just made the comment. I've not seen any police. I've not seen any security officers. But apparently they're close enough that they're right there, which seems odd that they wouldn't have been visible.
But it was a punishment zone.
It was a punishment zone.
Specific punishment zones, but I guess they would be around the punishment zone.
I guess that's true. So they come up. They're ready to put Wesley to death on the spot. He's got a little syringe. He's got a little poison, a little whatever. He's going to kill Wesley on the spot. They're less concerned about Wesley dying, the police are, than upsetting him about the fact that he's going to die. So they stopped the process, and they're like, well, now look what you've done. You've scared him. He's like, well, you were going to kill him. Of course, all right. So, yeah. So that's kind of the crux of the problem. Riker beats the snot out of the cop. Worf and Yar pull their guns. They're obvious. They're phasers. And
like garage door openers.
Yes. And they're ready to stop everything. Actually, I think at one point it was women's Gillette razors, shower razors, turned upside down.
All the way around.
Oh, yeah.
And they were painted a certain way. That used to be the prop for the phaser, which was odd. Don't know where that came from, but sure. So that's the crux of the problem now. So now he's been judged. He's been found guilty. They have witnesses. They've got an admission of guilt.
So that was very interesting to me. Where we have witnesses, admission of guilt. Like they were.
Yeah.
It was still a proper process.
They were going down. They were going down the checklist.
They went down the list.
And as soon as they went down the checklist, and there was a check in every box. Okay, well, here comes the syringe. Come here, boy.
Let's kill it.
It's done.
It's time to make this happen, Captain.
But, and here's another thing. They said, Matt and I even commented on a minute ago, they've gotten used to a little bit of sadness when someone dies, and then you get over it and move on. However, the 3 kids that he was playing ball with were freaking right out.
Oh yeah, no,
don't kill him. He didn't know. It was my fault. I threw the ball. He didn't know it, and they were trying to defend him and step in the way.
Yeah.
So I don't know that everybody on the planet agrees with it all the time.
But, and it makes you wonder if playing at love makes you, I guess, there's enough of that pleasure that it distracts the population from that sort of thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? So the young people, they've not had that distraction
and that
yet.
could be it. But that's a real stretch to fill that hole.
I was thinking as it was playing out, it's like a whole society that's just completely free love and everything. And it seems absurd because no civilization actually progresses if they're like this.
Right.
Also, because someone says no one ever does anything that makes them uncomfortable. It's like, well, then how does anyone grow or improve whatsoever?
Right. Right.
It's just complete infantilism. And you get that a little bit. And so I was thinking there's a saying by Chesterton, I think. He says the first thing tyrants provide their potential slaves is free love and free food because it pacifies them. Right. So it's like, well, these guys, this isn't how a population like this would behave. And then they got to their legal system.
Yeah.
It's like everyone thinks punishable by death. It's like, oh, that makes sense. They are in a complete. They are completely stomped down upon. Everything is locked down, super tight.
Yeah.
It is a soft tyranny that they are under.
And I don't know. Was it? I never got the impression that the god. We've not really gotten to the god of the Edo yet, or Edo. We've not really gotten to him yet. But there's the beings around the planet, and their ship that's kind of in and out of our dimension. Obviously, the Edo have seen it by the way that the girl reacted when she saw
it.
She saw the ship from the Enterprise.
We never got an answer to that.
You never really.
How do you recognize?
How do you recognize? Yeah. So you don't know what kind of interaction this being has with what it calls its children. You don't know what that relationship is. But do you think that it is kind of the lawgiver? Is it the Moses? Is it the, it's written the law on the tablet and given it to somebody there on the planet, or or is this a system of laws that they've come up with somehow on their own?
I think it's history.
Them. Yeah, because at one point when before they were talking about the punishment, and just saying they didn't have police and everything, the comment was made about they used to, a long time ago they had all kinds of problems. You should have seen us then. Something along those were the lines, and they said, but now we've progressed past that. Mm-hmm. And if you have that much trouble where everybody is doing something wrong, that's not something you just progress past.
Right.
That brings in the God figure in this episode, and we don't know what their interaction was. We don't know what their history was, but it definitely leads you to believe that that entity, that being, has imposed these rules and these laws and has made things, quote unquote, better for these people.
Right. He came in and said, this is the way it's going to be now.
Yeah.
Right. And then enforced the laws, because they were very afraid of him. They said, our God has the power to do things.
Right. It can make its presence known. It can make its presence felt, maybe.
Right. Yeah. And whatever this being was, it did have powers because it could stop certain systems on the Enterprise. Which was weird. It stopped communication twice.
Yeah. There's a couple of directions that I really want to go with this, because there's the whole discussion of, capital punishment, mm-hmm. which is, it's important for this episode. There's a whole other discussion with the Prime Directive, because there were some issues there as well. But I've not read anywhere on this, but there really seems to be with Star Trek in the first, we keep, this is episode 7. I think when you look it up online, I think it's episode 8. So I think Encounter at Farpoint was technically 2 episodes.
It depends on
where you look. Yeah.
So Farpoint was 2 episodes that aired back to back.
Yes.
But technically it was 2 episodes.
Yeah. So if you look on IMDb, I think it says this is episode 7. If you look on some of the wiki pages and that sort of thing, this is episode 8.
Yeah.
But so we're 7 or 8 episodes in. And in fully half of the episodes we've seen so far, they've run into a being who is so powerful as to being on the edge of omnipotence. You know what I mean? The ability to affect things at a level completely unimaginable by any species that we've run into. Humans can't, humans obviously don't think that way. It's so far beyond. And I'm, like I said, progressing through it this way, it makes me wonder, I'm trying to think ahead. I know that trend stops. Obviously Q sticks around. But eventually the beings that we come across, and maybe it doesn't, because I can think of several episodes where they do run into ultra powerful other dimensional, creatures or life forms. But it really seems to be, I don't know if it's a crutch for these stories where we're getting into these huge powerful beings as as some kind of a deus ex machina, you know what I mean? Just kind of a storytelling device that we can't think of a way to take this poor, pitiful civilization that doesn't have warp technology and this mighty Federation, and we can't think of a good way to not have the Federation walk all over them. You know what I mean? Or not have. So we need this. We need this God being. We need this ultra powerful alien to take that spot. And it really seems, like I said, it seems like they're coming up with that a lot. And I don't know if it's, like I said, laziness in the writing or
inexperience with what's going on.
Yeah, I think a lot of it would be the laziness or the inexperience, because especially in science fiction, they a lot of times will go out of their way to, as far as their story is concerned anyway, to disprove God, basically. The reason these people think they have a God is because it was a being more powerful than them that showed them their power.
It scared them.
The Federation shows up, and well, he's clearly not a God. You know, and every time that we've, like you said, we've run into these beings, they've seemed like godlike at the beginning, but at the end, they've come up with some sort of solution for, well, they're not a God.
Right.
You know, and we've talked about before how they've said, you know, for even different religious beliefs, people got into wars and things. It's a common trope in some science fiction to lump those people who are religious or rely on religion to be the weaker, less advanced race.
Yeah.
Not even, you know, I don't want to classify it just as science fiction. Fantasy does the same thing. I read a lot more fantasy and stuff than I do science fiction. They do the same thing. I don't know. It does seem like a crutch that they'll use just to be able to come up with an episode like this. Right. And I mean, really, it was about capital punishment. The sexuality and the God thing.
Kind of secondary.
It was kind of secondary. It didn't need to be there. It was there. Well, not the sexuality. The God part was there to fill in some plot holes that they could just say, okay, these people believe in this God is their leader. Now we don't have to answer these 50 questions about this race.
Right.
Let's move on.
Right.
And I think that's where the crutch comes in.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a pretty common trope with particularly science fiction and Star Trek in particular, because I think it's, I mean, the people writing this obviously aren't Christians, and I don't expect them to be, but I don't think they quite understand. There's something called the Lindy principle, where the longer something has been around, the longer it will be around and strong. That's why some things last forever. So
okay,
right.
Christianity's been around 2,000 years. It ain't going anywhere.
It's got a long way to go.
Like the lead's been around 3,000 years. It's going to be around at least another 3,000 years.
Right.
Type of thing.
Right.
So yeah.
And I am going to stop myself very short of saying that the people writing these episodes of Star Trek are going out to make fun of people who are religious. I don't know that they are. I think it's just a common crutch in the genre.
Right.
To lay on.
See,
I don't even think at this episode that they were entirely negative about the people who did believe in the God.
Right. And so, it's not that, I don't know that they're saying that God in general doesn't exist. You know, God, big G, God.
Right.
They're saying that these people's God, little G God, isn't a God. It's an alien.
Somebody with more power.
It's an more powerful alien.
Right.
And Data kind of makes the comment, and it's a common phrase here. You know, is anything that's significantly scientifically advanced would seem like magic to someone who is less advanced.
Right.
And in this case, you know, he makes the extra leap to say,
right.
You know,
and that's kind of what my point was. I don't think that even in this episode that they went out of their way to make it a negative connotation that they believed in it. But I mean, the crutch was still used, and Data also, and we've been doing it too. Most of the episode they referred to it in singular. Data, who's the only one who had true communication with it, referred to it as them.
Yes.
And they. It was a plural.
It's a group of beings.
It was a group of beings. We never found out how many, but it was a group of beings. So
at this time, like in previous episodes, it's sort of people have acted ashamed of Earth's past, of what they have seen reflected in other species or cultures.
Yeah.
But this time, it seemed it was different, because even the Edo, one of them made a comment about, well, so you can just walk all over the primitive.
Yeah.
They sort of made fun of that idea. Like, of course you think we're primitive.
Right.
And Picard was, no. It's they went out of their way to explain that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Which was different, I felt, than some other episodes.
Something else when we're talking about Earth's history that I just remembered. Was it in the last episode where they were talking about... Yeah, it was in the last episode where they were talking about people being at war for different reasons. And Riker was absolutely baffled that these two civilizations would hate each other. Why would they hate each other? And Picard said, well, it could be over economic reasons, social reasons, religious reasons, whatever. And Riker's like, I don't get it. It just doesn't make any sense. And then this episode... He looks at Worf and says, when in Rome.
Yeah.
Okay, how do you know anything about Rome and not understand any of those reasons for war?
Yeah, we talked about that. They're aware of literature, right? I mean, it's like...
Yeah. I mean...
I just don't understand anything.
But he mentioned Rome.
When in Rome.
Who specifically conquered people and went into war for social reasons, economic reasons, religious reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was just one of those. It was a throwaway line, and it didn't really mean anything, but it just struck me as odd.
And it might not, because Rome was one that brought their law with them wherever they went. So now it's
the Federation
Roman law.
Federation,
yeah.
And we were talking about the Prime Directive earlier. One of the things that Data said, and it was kind of a rush line, and they cut right on to the next scene. But when Picard was questioning Data, he asked them what they knew about, if they knew anything about the Prime Directive. And he said, well, yeah, they know about the Prime Directive. And so Picard was trying to pick his brain to figure out how these people were going to react, these beings. And Data kind of made the comment, is like, well, they understand what our law is, so they're going to judge us by our law. And then they moved right along to the next scene.
Yeah.
So the idea is Picard's going to go down there and he's going to try to finagle a deal and figure out a way to get Wesley out. And just take the chance that they're going to judge his actions based on the Prime Directive.
Yeah.
And whether or not that it was the right thing to do, or if they are breaking their law, their punishment for breaking any law is death. And they clearly had the power to obliterate the Enterprise.
Yeah. And all right, so this is a segue into kind of where I was wanting to get with the Prime Directive.
Yeah, I was hoping to get here too.
So with the Prime Directive, and we've not learned a whole lot about it through 8 episodes of The Next Generation. The main meat of the Prime Directive we kind of picked up from the episode with the Ferengi, where the Ferengi are arguing that with the godlike being in that episode, that the humans or the Federation, they're withholding technology from primitive species. They're purposely holding people back, and they're
limiting commercial opportunities.
So they're doing these things on purpose to these primitive places. And again, we've not gotten into what is the actual Prime Directive, but one of the rules as you go forward is you don't interfere with pre-warp civilizations. All right, and so and it's hard to judge Picard based on what he doesn't know that we know now. You know what I mean? The writers haven't written down the law at this point. They've not.
Oh yeah.
They've not said, "Oh well." No,
it was
this
a fluid
is one
thing
of the
at
rules.
this point.
But technically, just them visiting the planet was already breaking the Prime Directive. So they discovered this pre-warp civilization on a whim, just on the fly by accident, and they beam down. And they interact, and they, obviously they've seen transporter technology now at this point. They've seen,
because that's the thing. In other versions of Star Trek and, the games, other TV shows, movies, whatever, if they're going to beam down to a pre-warp society, they beam down to a secluded location.
Yes. And then they
change clothes.
Change their appearance.
So that they can, they don't change clothes. They use whatever technology it is to make them look different. And then they go and they interact with the people.
Right.
This time, they beamed right down into the courtyard.
Basically, right down into these people's pants. I mean,
absolutely. I mean, it was just
whatever they were wearing.
Whatever, right into their jumpers. Yes,
yes. I mean, there was a lot with the Prime Directive that made me question what was going on.
Right,
but it's like you said, we have to remember they weren't. This all wasn't written down, understood the way we understand it now.
Right.
But according to what we understand about the Prime Directive now, they just destroyed it the whole time they were there.
They've already broken the law. Then they broke it again by going back the second time. And then they break it again by rescuing Wesley. And even that, to me, that's the weakest of the offenses. Because, the Prime Directive is you don't interfere with the natural evolution of a species. That's the Prime Directive. To me, the interference of showing this species that this technology exists. Now, Picard has no idea when they first beam down that there's this god alien ship, hovering around that is even more advanced than we are.
Right.
But for them to beam down, so like I said, the aliens have now seen transporter technology, communications technology. They beam one of them up to the ship, so now they've seen, space flight. They've seen artificial gravity. They've seen, all of these technological things that honestly, while they're down there playing at love, they're never going to discover on their own.
No, they're not.
So they've gone down, and that's the shattering of the Prime Directive. Telling them, hey, look, we didn't know your law. You can't kill our guy. To me, that's just common sense.
But in the episode, when they say that they're going to beam him up, and he just says, Wesley, come here, the main Ito that we've been talking to this whole time, he says, you can't do this to us. What's this going to do to our society?
Right.
And I'm sitting there going, what?
Yeah, I didn't cut. Yeah,
we didn't let you kill a guy. I mean, what is that going to do to your society? I don't know.
Yes.
Go play at love. Right. We'll see you later.
Is this going to introduce
about this in a week?
Yeah, is this going to introduce anarchy into your system? What is this?
Yeah, I mean, but that just goes to show, like what we just said a second ago. I don't know that they knew what the Prime Directive was.
Right.
This did mess with their legal system.
Yeah. Well,
it broke a guy out of jail, which in and of itself is illegal. So now they should all be put to death, but yet they beam away.
Yeah.
But the weird part about that is Picard looks up, prays, I don't know, talks to the alien being up there, and basically says what you just said. Look, we didn't know. We're sorry. We've apologized. We're going to take our guy and we're going to go and we'll never be back.
Yeah.
If you just let us go.
Right.
Suddenly they all beam away.
I like the line, and I think it warrants a little bit of discussion. The line that he said, where he said, and I do you have it written down? The civilization.
There can be no justice. Every law is absolute.
Right.
Right.
And
you have to take into account the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law, essentially.
And I think, I don't know. Like I said, I'm interested to hear what you guys think about that.
All right. I've actually got something for this. I've got an example for this. I went for a job interview one time, and I did great all the way through the interview process. They were getting ready to offer me a job, and they just had a couple more questions to ask me. And then my next stop was going to be the guy that was offering me a job and tell me what position I was going to be in and let me go. There was only one question that kept me from getting offered the job. And the question was, what happens if you see someone, you're a manager or a shift leader or whatever, and you see someone stealing something? What do you do? My response was, if they're stealing like electronics, a TV or a DVD player, Blu-ray player, whatever, yeah, sure. Just that's a big deal. You terminate them on the spot. But if they just try to swipe a Coke out of the vending machine or a candy bar out of the rack, that's probably a warning, and then you keep an eye on them and make sure they don't do it again. That was the wrong answer. No matter what they steal, fired on the spot, escorted out.
Yeah.
To where this plays into what we were just talking about there is no justice if every law is absolute. I'm very glad I didn't get that job if that was the environment I was going to be working in.
Right.
I mean, you're going to fire somebody on the spot because they swiped a 50-cent candy bar? Well, this was years ago. It was a 50-cent candy bar then. You know.
Sounds nice.
Right? They're what, 75, 85 now? But, I mean, it is that. I don't think it's fair to not take into account the situation. I mean, there's a whole movie based on this one idea. You know, Judge Dredd.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the entire movie is about.
Yeah.
And at the end, they even come to the same conclusion, you know. So, I don't know. Matt, you said you had something?
Yeah, I always tried to go back to the law, the biblical principles on this, because there's a lot of examples in that. So even people look at the old law or the Old Testament as pretty harsh, even though it really wasn't when you look at the wider culture and the rest of the world around them. Right. But in general, it was meant to be case law. It was meant to have principles and examples of things that happened, and then that's why they had judges. And so the judges could see what happened and say, well, what should we do in this case? And then they would look at the case law.
Right, look
and
at precedent.
decide based on the context and the situation.
Right.
It requires wisdom to determine the best course of action. And then even things that had capital punishment, like breaking the Sabbath, for instance. You had, that was it. That was the punishment. You break the Sabbath, you do any work, then you're killed. You're stoned. Taken out the camp and stoned. It seems absolute. But then you get to Jesus, and he says, well, is it unlawful to heal on the Sabbath? If every one of you would see one of your sheep trapped in a pit, you wouldn't pick them up. Therefore, it is lawful to heal. It is lawful to save a life on the Sabbath. The spirit of the Sabbath is giving rest. You don't only rest yourself, you also give rest to your animals, to your slaves. It's giving rest. And so healing and saving life is giving rest. That's the spirit of the law.
Right.
And so it's not absolute.
Yeah, they had taken a law that, like you said, was situational and case by case, and they had made it absolute.
Yeah. So in that case, the Pharisees were angry that Jesus' disciples were picking wheat as they were going through a field, right, to feed themselves?
That was one of them.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They were gleaning. Yeah. That was one example. And that's when Jesus says, listen, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath.
Right.
Right.
So the point of these laws isn't because of we could have this thing enshrined as the law.
Right.
That's not why it's there. It's for other things, other reasons. So yeah, there's something deeper behind the law. It's not an end to itself.
Right, and the exception where the biblical law is different than what we saw in this episode is that biblical law was handed down by God, and then man got a hold of it, as he normally does, and messes things up, which is part of the reason why we had the law to begin with. In this episode, this law was handed down by the being
we
up
assume,
there. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, whatever it was making sure that it was carried out. So, but yeah, I mean, when you turn something absolute, it is hard to have justice. And I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know why I've got Sylvester Stallone on the mind. Demolition Man.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's the same. He's done a couple movies about this idea. But at one point, when he first gets woken up and he's supposed to be going out and capturing people that go to where the crime is being committed, and he catches somebody, when he grabs her by the arm, she drops something out of her bag. And he looks at it, and it's food, and he lets her go. And the Sandra Bullock character comes up and goes, "Oh, why did you let them go? We had them, everything, yada, yada, yada." And he said, "They're hungry. They're just trying to eat." And he picks up what she dropped, and it was like, I want to say it was like a hamburger, but it really wasn't, because the only restaurant was Taco Bell. So it had to be a taco or a burrito.
I think it was a can. I think it was a can of something.
I know way too much about this movie.
Sure.
Okay, but I think it was canned goods, probably.
Yeah.
And that's what they were stealing. What was it? Those little plastic bins.
Probably.
Whatever. But they were stealing food. So in a place where he was supposed to execute absolute law, that's what they brought him back for, because that's what he was known for.
Right.
Back in the day, was going to any extent to do that. It just showed that they had their history wrong, where he was willing to take the situation. He wasn't going to beat up and arrest somebody that was just trying to feed their family.
Right.
And it just brings back what we've been saying. You know, the absolute laws don't offer any room for justice. I mean,
yeah, and any justice we do in this life anyway is not perfect justice, no matter what. Because if you, like Stalin, for instance, who killed millions and millions of his own people, right? Mm-hmm. Is death for him justice? Right? Or does that one life weigh all these millions? Or if someone assaults your family, completely kills them all, tortures them, and then the verdict's handed down and they're executed, do you think justice has really been done?
Right. Has that repaired anything?
Is that justice? No, it's not. It's the best approximation we can get in this life of justice.
Right.
It's not. You wouldn't feel that was justice.
Right.
He deserves a lot worse than just death.
Right.
Well, there's a borderline there between justice and vengeance.
Yeah.
And that's the reason for judges, and the reason, because if you leave it to me, if somebody, attacks my family and you leave it to me to mete out justice, then it turns into vengeance very quickly. Because at that point, okay, well, how bad did you hurt my family? Because I'm going to hurt you 10 times as bad. I'm going to hurt you 20 times as bad. And I'm going to like it. I'm going to have fun with it. And that's where it gets bad. And it's like I said, you lose the just part of justice, right?
And there's vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. And it's even why there's a hell. Like a lot of people have problems with that, but some people deserve hell.
Right.
A lot of people deserve it. And that is justice. That is 100% justice for them, for what they did to other people in this life.
And we as people, that idea between justice and vengeance, for us, at least in a fantasy or entertainment way, we love that line.
Yeah.
Between justice and vengeance. One of the biggest comic book characters is Batman.
Yeah.
Every superhero is a vigilante, right?
Every superhero is a vigilante, but Batman in particular, he is out for vengeance. He just happens to get justice on the way. Mm-hmm. He is out to avenge what happened to his parents.
Yeah.
And in doing so, he is going to punish anybody who breaks the law. Yeah. And that's that thin line. He's the one that specifically comes to mind. That he walks that thin line, and sometimes he crosses over it both ways.
Yeah.
Between going for justice only and going for vengeance. I mean, there's been plenty of times in the movies, maybe not that TV show, but in the comic books and in other books and stuff where someone has had to stop him. Because the big thing is, Batman never kills anybody. Well, sometimes Batman didn't kill somebody because somebody stopped Batman from killing somebody.
Yeah.
Usually the Joker.
Right. Oddly enough. But I mean, we enjoy that thin line. And this is just, this episode, I think, would have been a lot better if they would have gone that route with it than the sex route.
Yeah, but like
it may have been a bit dark for Star Trek.
Like you said, you needed the fluff this early on because Star Trek can get dark, and it does down the road. It's significantly darker. Never to the extent that some of the later series might get dark, but Next Generation, it's got its moments, but Next Generation is still kind of the progeny of the original series. Bright, colorful, the hippies movement. I mean, there's still a lot of that aspect to Next Generation,
and especially in this first season so far. I mean, and I've talked about that's what I've liked so much, especially on the last episode. There is a lot more of the Monster of the Week stuff than what you get in a lot of the later ones. Sure. And in this one, the Monster of the Week was a bubble. A bubble that got stuck to Data's forehead. Yep. But I don't know. I mentioned to Dennis earlier. The reason I like last week's episode, I say last week, I don't know what the time frame is these go up. Well, I'll stick with last week. Was after a little bit of a gap with no Monsters for the Week, I had 3 distinct Monsters of the Week plus a wonderful face that Worf made. And because of that and the introduction of Data portraying Sherlock Holmes, I found some enjoyment in that episode.
Sure. That
being said, if this was 1987, and last Saturday I watched that episode, and this Saturday I watched this episode, I would probably at that point turn to my wife and say, this is a 1-season show. I might finish out the season, might not.
Yeah.
It was... Because this episode, last episode had the good monsters, but it was a really bad episode. This episode had so much potential to be a really good episode because of the subject matter it was tackling. But the stapling on of the sex thing was just weird and out of place. And I get why they did it. I mean, like you said, they needed to do the fluff. And this is weird. This is weird coming from somebody. Yeah, this is weird coming from somebody who has said that I don't always like watching science fiction to have the deep, thinky episodes. I want it to be light and fun. This was not the episode to go light and fun. No. It just wasn't. If you were going to tackle this, saying that this is the prime directive and capital punishment, you should have gone all in on that.
Yeah.
And like we were talking about earlier, the guy that originally wrote it, he submitted the episode, and it was purely about capital punishment. We talked a little bit about the prime directive. The other writers, Gene Roddenberry and somebody else, got a hold of it.
The perverts, I guess.
Yeah, they decided they wanted to sex it up. And, they added this stuff into it. And it bothered the original guy that wrote it so much that he used a different name in the credits. Yeah. He used a pen name because it wasn't the episode he wrote.
Yeah, I can understand that. There's a lot of potential.
I would love to see the episode he wrote. I would love to see this cast do his episode.
Yeah.
It does seem there's a lot of wasted potential because it is such a deep and rich topic.
Right.
And they seem like they just skimmed the depths a little bit.
Well, you got to remember though, okay? So
this was an hour-long show.
It's an hour-long show. This is 8 episodes in. All right. Apparently, according to IMDb, this was the first episode written after the pilot episode. Now, it took them, with the rewrites and everything, it took them longer to get it to air, so it ended up being 7th or 8th episode.
And it's also the first one where they did so many location shoots, they said, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
this is a more expensive episode.
Exactly. More expensive episode. But again, this was, it's early on in Next Generation. So how deep do you want to go with a sci-fi audience that you're trying to hook and you're trying to bring in on this idea? Who knows what Roddenberry's thinking at this point about how far he wants Next Generation to go. The original series went 2 seasons. Surely he's thinking, I just want to go one more. I want to go 3 seasons. I want to go, double it. Let me go 4 seasons. And it ended up going 7. So it was significantly longer.
And it could have gone longer.
It really
could have gone longer. They just said we're going to do movies instead.
Yeah.
Well,
and exactly. And the legacy has gone on even farther than that. So, it really took off, and you've got to wonder, if they had taken a darker turn earlier, would it have gripped people as well as it did, or did it need kind of the fun, some of the like I said, some of the more adult things that we got in this episode? Is that something that, as you're looking at each episode, and they're thematically, they're so different. You're all revolving around the same cast, the same group of characters, the same goal of exploration. But thematically, each episode is so different. You've got one that's pure space exploration in the first episode. You go to the second episode, and it's a sexual episode, right, where Data and Yar hook up, and you've got all, and then you go to another episode, and you're back to kind of exploration and monster of the week, and then you go on to another one, and you're into technical aspects and warp travel, and this. So they're kind of rotating in these themes as they're going on, and it's like they're trying to, I need to hit this part of the audience. I need to hit this part of the audience. Okay, we've not done an adult episode. We need to hit that part of the audience. We need to, and they're just trying to throw out these nets as wide as possible, just to kind of let's drag the audience along with us until we hit our stride.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm thinking about the whole time you're talking about that, is they have definitely not found their footing yet.
Right.
This early on in the run of the series, you're probably right. This is the only way they could have done it. I still want to see that original script.
Yeah.
In season 6, season 7, they could have done it.
And there are other Prime Directive episodes.
Well, not so much about the Prime Directive. I'm talking about their thing about the capital punishment and the absolute justice.
And more
I would have liked to see them tackle that later on in the series. It almost feels out of place, and I guess part of the reason I'm being so hard on it is because I do know what this series turns into.
Right.
And what they could have done with this episode, oh man, it could have been really good.
Yeah.
And more depth doesn't necessarily mean dark either.
That's true. And
so it could have still been, I don't know.
It could have still been a better treatment without getting dark. I could see that.
Yeah.
Could you imagine this is a Q episode?
I don't know. Maybe. They said they've not. They do a good job of not overusing Q.
Oh, I know. They do, and it's not necessarily that I want to see more of Q, because I think using him sparingly is a good idea. But if you're going to tackle the Prime Directive and you're going to tackle Picard offering himself up to be judged on how he's treating the Prime Directive, could you imagine Q being involved in that some way? I mean, that would have been
kind of a good continuation,
because the last thing they did, Q put him in a courtroom and he judged him.
Right.
This would have been a good follow-up to that. Now, we're too early in the season. This would have been like season 2 or 3.
Right.
Q comes along. They found their footing a little bit. They're looking at it from a different light. It's not a planet-wide toga party.
Right.
I don't know. It had a lot of potential to be really good and tackle the Prime Directive and absolute justice. And with all the other fluff added in, it just barely missed the mark to the left.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the scenes on the ship were much more interesting to me. Like I was drawn in a lot with Picard just trying to wrestle with what he was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And when he's talking with Data and some of their back and forth was good. And at one point Picard says, "I refuse to let arithmetic answer this question."
Yeah.
Right.
Which kind of, and I'm trying to think of when, not Search for Spock. Oh, Wrath of Khan. I'm trying to think of when Wrath of Khan came out, because Wrath of Khan was the movie that had the famous line, but Spock, it's not the needs of the many, or it's the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
And then that answers that in Star Trek 3, where
Right,
the needs
Kurt,
of the one.
Of the one, right? Exactly. and now Picard come and I kind of, while I'm sitting here thinking about it, I'm gonna have to look up and see when Wrath of Khan came out.
It's like 82, wasn't it?
Was it that early?
Yeah, it was early.
Yeah. Okay, and it could be. So 5 years later now you've got Picard. 5 years our time later, 100 years later, Next Generation time or Star Trek universe time, you've got Picard kind of coming out at completely opposite, because Data asks him, would the life of one person be worth the life of 1,000 people on the ship? And he's, right. I'm not going to let arithmetic make this decision for me. And
he was struggling with what was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I mean,
and it's weird because Wesley says, "Well, it sounds like I do have a say in this."
Yeah,
and it was
and
weird.
it was ignored.
He was ignored completely. Because
boy, shut up.
Picard was right in not letting arithmetic answer the question, because he shouldn't be the one to just say, "Yes, this life is worth this 1,000," but that person might be able to answer for themselves. It's like, yes, my life is worth more, or my life is worth far less than the lives of the 4 other members of my family, type of thing, right? I can make that decision. You couldn't make that decision for me.
Well, but that's just it. So, can you make that decision? And does your role is it your role as head of household that allows you to make that decision, or is it your role as it's your life that allows you to make that decision? Mm-hmm. So, we had similar thing came up in Avengers. All right, so Infinity War. All right, so Endgame is out now. There's not going to be any spoilers for Endgame, but Infinity War, if you're listening to this, I expect you've seen Infinity War. You get to,
I've never seen Infinity War.
Oh, well,
you don't continue. He hasn't seen past
you don't count.
One of the third Thor movie or second Thor movie? Is that
third Thor. He saw the third Thor. He saw.
I've seen all
Doctor
the Thors.
Strange.
I've seen Doctor Strange. The rest of the stuff.
Guardians of the Galaxy.
And I've seen the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. All the other movies, I stopped at the second Captain America. I've never seen Winter Soldier or anything after.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Winter Soldier was the second Captain America. No matter how
you stopped there, inclusive of the second one, or before the second Captain America?
I stopped before the second one.
Okay.
I've never seen
Winter Soldier. Okay. So anyway, Infinity War. You've got.
Yeah. I know the story. It's a 30-year-old story.
Right. Thanos is coming after Vision. Vision has the Mind Stone in his head. Mm-hmm. It's in his head. Mm-hmm. It was part of Loki's scepter in the original Avengers movie. Yep. Now they used it to build Vision. So he's got it in his head. Thanos is coming after it. Thanos wants it. The Thanos sends his minions after him. They beat the snot out of Vision, and they take him down quick because they know that Vision is one of the strongest Avengers, bar none, at this point.
Right.
Thor could take him. Hulk, all hulked out, could take him, but really that's about it. At this point, they don't know Captain Marvel. They don't know that Guardians of the Galaxy exists. Right. All that stuff. But he wants to sacrifice himself. Let's destroy this Mind Stone so that Thanos can't get it. And Captain America tells him, no, we're not trading lives. We're not going to trade your life for any number of lives. Which Captain America, he's the commanding officer, right? He's the head of the household. He's the head of the family. He makes that decision. So you get toward the end of the movie. And now Captain America is wanting to attack Thanos, right? He's going after him. And Vision comes in and saves him. And he's like, you should have gotten out. Captain America says, you should have gotten out of here. What are you still doing here? Let me take the hit, blah, blah, blah. And Vision hits him with the same line. We're not trading lives. We're not great. Trading one for one here.
Right.
But is it, like I said, what is it that gives you the right to make that decision? If Josiah, if he decided, you know what, I'm willing to die. The 4 people in my family are more important than I am as a whole. Is he allowed to make that decision? I wouldn't think so.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that Matt, you'd step in and you'd say, you know what, we're not doing this. We're not having this conversation.
Right.
Which
that's a good point. Yeah.
You know, with Wesley Crusher, he's
it's not his responsibility, because the responsibility comes into it.
Exactly.
It's not his responsibility.
Right.
It would be mine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Wesley Crusher, 12, 13, 14 years old. He's got a mom and he's got a captain. Yeah. You know, one of the two of them are going to make the decision for him. Now, sure, he can man up, and you know, and it really is. Yeah. It's good for his character that he wanted to make that decision. You know, it really comes across as altruistic. It comes across as brave, as you know. But realistically,
he's also told to shut up.
He's not in any position to make that decision.
He's not. Yeah.
You know,
and when he's told to shut up, he's not called by name.
No, he is called boy.
He is called boy.
Yeah.
He was definitely put in his place.
He's called the Crusher Boy a lot in that one. He's not called Wesley by the Crusher Boy.
Yeah, he's called the Crusher Boy. That particular time, though, it was just boy. Yeah. In Star Trek, though, it is absolutely Picard's decision.
Mm-hmm.
Every life on that ship is his responsibility, and he's going to have to answer for it if anything happens. Anything unnatural happens.
And by being on the ship, everyone implicitly agrees to that authority
structure. Right. So
that's a military thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a military thing. So that is absolutely not Wesley Crusher, who at this point is an ensign.
Yes.
That is not his. He does not get to make that.
Right.
I mean, and in reality, if he would have been a trained ensign, he would have known better than to say anything.
Well, and
I mean,
it's all about context too. Because, you know, you think about, you know, Geordi. All right, so you've got LaForge. LaForge at this point, is he ensign? He may be an ensign. I don't think he's Lieutenant LaForge.
He was in this episode.
Is he Lieutenant LaForge?
Lieutenant, yeah.
So it's Lieutenant LaForge. So if you've got LaForge and him and Data and Worf are all down on the planet, and you know, you obviously this doesn't happen often in Star Trek, but say, you know, Vietnam, you know, a common trope in Vietnam movies is the guy who throws himself on the grenade, right? Mm-hmm. He sacrifices his life for the good of his team, of his comrades, right? Nobody would think that, hey, that you don't have the right to do that if he threw himself on a grenade to save, you know, and I don't think that even if Captain Picard were there, that somebody would think wrongly of a lieutenant for throwing himself on a grenade and sacrificing himself to save his captain, his lieutenant commander, you know, his ensigns who are below him, you know, right. any level. The captain's not going to say you didn't have the right to make that call.
Right. And I don't disagree with that. But there is one big difference. If you're in Vietnam and somebody throws a grenade that lands at your feet,
it's a split-second decision.
You're not going to sit around and say, Captain, you want this one or you want me?
Yeah. Can we vote on it?
Yeah, I mean, do I have a right to say? Do you have a right to say? I mean, you just do it.
Right, absolutely.
And that's the one difference, because at this point, they had held the Ito off until sunset before something had to be done with Wesley.
Right.
So they have basically taken that grenade, put the pin back in it, and said, in a couple hours, we are going to blow this thing up.
Right.
Let's figure out what we can do between now and then to not have to blow it up.
Yeah.
That's where the decision was taken from Wesley's hands and put back in Picard's hands.
Gotcha. Like I said,
you had a great point though, and I knew where you were going with it.
Yeah.
It just kind of went, because I had been thinking about it from both sides.
Yeah.
And I actually
responsibility and authority matters.
I actually got the chance to get out both arguments fully from what I'd been thinking, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I like that. I don't get to do that very often.
I was literally biting my lower lip, trying to let you finish.
So, what are we going to rate this episode?
I liked this episode. To me, this was a positive. This was much better than
compared to last week.
You know, it had some fluff to it. There was a lot to it that, you know, when even thinking back, when I was trying to warn you guys what was coming, it wasn't to me. It wasn't a warning like, oh, shield your eyes. Don't let your kids watch. It wasn't that kind of thing. It wasn't a they're scantily clad. You can't let your
Abigail watched it with me. She's 8.
Right.
She didn't see anything on there. She didn't see it when we went to Florida last year. A couple years ago.
Absolutely. To me, it's there was some silliness to it. You look back, it's very dated. It was very 80s. The hair, the lot of it was very 80s. But realistically, I thought the topic, I thought the arguments made for both sides, I thought the end solution. I thought Picard made the right decision. It was a common sense decision. I'm not going to let my crewman die because he landed in some flowers that just happened to be off limits
today.
Yeah.
Sorry if that offends you. I'm sorry if your God doesn't like that. We're not as common sense. And so, like I said, to me, I enjoyed the episode. If I had to rate it, it's still just kind of a first season fluff piece. 3.5, maybe a 4, maybe a soft 4.
I was gonna say 4.
Yeah.
I did like some of the debates, the idea behind it. The resolution was sort of, okay. Yeah, I would give it the same score.
Mike?
I'm hovering around 3.5 or 4 again.
Yeah. I think you've come up since we started talking about it. Because when we talked about it before, I really expected you to be pretty low.
I had a hard time. Initially my reaction when I watched it earlier this weekend was solid 2.5.
Yeah.
It has gone up almost a whole nother point just from me realizing that the reason I was being so hard on it was because of how much potential it showed.
Right.
This cast can do some good things. These writers can do some good things. They need to get out of their own way.
Yeah.
Like I said, at this point, based on the space jellyfish, our monsters of the week last week, in this episode, I would still, if I was watching this back in 87, be thinking, yeah, this is a 1, maybe 2 season.
Yeah.
This isn't going to do any better than the original series.
Right.
Thankfully, they all get out of their own way.
Yeah.
It's less the actors and more the writers.
Right.
Clearly.
Absolutely.
But
it's
hard. It's hard for me to be really hard on this because of where the series goes. This is the first step in that direction. You have to peel back the fluff and look for it. But this is the first step in that direction.
Right.
So I'll give it another middle of the road, just like last week. Another 3.5.
Yeah.
All right. And this is out of 7.
Out of 7.
Yes,
this is out of 7.
7 seasons. We can give it out of 7.
And the only reason I can't tick it up that other half point, when Wesley runs off to play with the other teenagers.
Mm-hmm. Teenagers in air quotes.
Yes, there needs to be air quotes there. She asked him to show him something special.
You seen The Jerk?
She wants
him a special purpose.
Yeah.
Sorry.
She wants him to teach them how to play ball. That's all she says is ball. So Wesley immediately says, we need a bat. Okay, he's going to show him how to play baseball.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Especially when he describes the bat, he shows them how long it is and how thick it needs to be. They're going to play stickball because they didn't have a bat, so he's going to find a stick. They're going to play stickball. The way Wesley broke the flowers was he had the guy throw a football pass.
They were doing something weird on the way there.
Come on, you don't bring your sports ball to this sci-fi talk,
right? Well, if you're going to get it right, because if you get it wrong
I thought it was going to be like someone hits the ball and Wesley has to go get it.
That's
it
what
went
I
over
thought
a fence.
too. Yeah, he's going to have to dive to catch it.
It was going to be even less dramatic. He just steps over to pick up the ball and then...
I thought it was going to be something like that.
She did say, we'll go get a bat. We can go get one from blah, blah, blah.
And that's where they were going was to go get the bat.
Oh, okay.
I assume because they were in...
That's true.
She said something about going to a garden and...
The stereotypical broken window from the baseball.
Right, and that's what I was expecting. Yeah. And then the stereotype for sci-fi fans is that we don't know sports ball.
Right. That's why I said it that way.
Oh, I know.
We're all sports ball fans.
So if you're going to do an episode where even in passing, and it was so minor, and I understand it was so minor, but if you're going to bring up sports ball, get it right.
Right. No, I agree.
The big blonde dude that was getting massaged at the beginning, the guy that was like 6'8".
Yeah, he could have been Jose Canseco.
275. Talk to him. He looks like he knows his sports ball.
Right.
Let him write that part.
Right.
But that to me, that was a solid half point off.
Yeah. How does someone get muscular if they don't do anything that makes them uncomfortable?
That's true.
Like, this hurts. I'm not going to do it anymore.
Well, you would think that running would be the same.
Maybe he's a Mellencamp fan.
Maybe.
Makes it hurt so good.
Oh, man.
Wow, I had no idea where you were going with that.
I'm dropping references left and right tonight, man.
That was... So one more. I know we've got. I know we're running this one long, but the acting on this one, again we've talked before about Spiner now has been solid the last couple episodes.
I thought he did really good.
I thought he did good on this one too. LeVar Burton. He didn't have a whole lot to do on this one, but he's previously
been for real. Is what Picard tells him.
Yes.
And then when he called Picard after he saw for real, he used his Reading Rainbow voice.
Oh, did he?
Did you hear him? The way he talked sounded just like he was reading something out of a book on Reading Rainbow, man. It was great.
I really thought Picard hit the captaincy well. Wesley Crusher's still growing. Tasha Yar She was a little bit better than normal, but she's still one-dimensional. Worf hasn't had his episode yet. We'll get to Worf.
He's still one-dimensional.
Troy's up and down for me. You caught a little bit of jealousy from her. At least I kind of felt like that when Riker first got his hug, and then she kind of got her hug, and she's like, "Oh, it extended to me too. Sweet. We'll let that one slide. We'll let that one go."
See, I got a completely different vibe from her hug. She looked incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can see.
It's like everybody else wrapped their arms around her. She just patted him on the shoulder like, "Okay, step back now. Thank you."
Go away. I can hear what you're thinking. Yeah. So, like I said, we still feel like the cast is growing. Feel like everybody's doing a decent job. Like I said. Will Wheaton, he's young. He's getting there. He's still got that big goofy grin.
He does. I thought Picard really shined in this episode.
Yeah.
The way he dealt with people. Also, someone who I originally thought was really annoying when I was watching the episode was Dr. Crusher. Mm-hmm. She's completely overacted. She's just going crazy. No, her son's just been taken and been told he's going to be put to death. No, she did an excellent job playing a mother.
Yes.
As a doctor and officer from Starfleet, she stepped out of that role.
Yeah.
She was a mother in this episode.
Yeah.
And I thought she did really well when you look at it that way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's all I wanted to add in.
Yeah.
So what are we going to name this one, Matt?
I was going to say Star Trek Baywatch.
Star Trek Baywatch.
I would have said Star Trek Return to the Blue Lagoon.
Nice, another 80s reference. I think I'm going to stick with Star Trek Next Generation Gone Wild.
Next Generation Gone Wild.
All right.
Woo!
Yeah.
Almost similar vein here.
Yeah. So much potential, but man, it's hard to peel back that fluff.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's right there in your face.
Prancing.
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 Until next time then.
Prance away.